The sledgehammer crashed through the fence at 3 a.m., sending splinters flying like shrapnel. Sarah Chen bolted upright in bed, her heart hammering as screams pierced the night, not from her neighbor Karen this time, but from somewhere much darker. The pool they'd fought over for months was finally gone, bulldozed into rubble just hours ago. She thought the nightmare was over. She was wrong, because when the police sirens wailed up the street and Karen's voice shrieked about, "What you've done," Sarah realized the real battle was just beginning, and someone wasn't walking away from this one alive. The morning after the pool removal, Sarah Chen stood at her kitchen window, cradling her coffee mug like a lifeline. For the first time in 8 months, she could look into her backyard without her blood pressure spiking, where the massive above-ground pool had dominated her view and her life. Nothing remained but patched earth and the sweet promise of normalcy. "Finally," she whispered, allowing herself a small smile. Her daughter Emma, 16 and perpetually dramatic, shuffled into the kitchen in her pajamas. "Is the witch next door still freaking out?" Emma asked, pouring herself orange juice. "Emma, don't call her that." Sarah's reproach lacked conviction. After what Karen Williams had put their family through, witch seemed generous. The pool saga had started innocently enough. Sarah's husband David had surprised her with the 24-foot above-ground pool for their 15th wedding anniversary, complete with deck and filtration system. It was beautiful, expensive, and according to their homeowners association, perfectly legal. Karen Williams had other ideas. Within a week of installation, Karen, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s who seemed to collect grievances like vintage, China had launched her first assault, a formal complaint to the HOA about excessive noise from their pool pump. When that failed, she'd escalated to the city, claiming the pool violated setback requirements. Sarah had spent thousands on a land survey proving otherwise. Then came the health department complaints about stagnant water-breeding mosquitoes, followed by anonymous calls to Child Protective Services claiming Sarah was neglecting pool safety around neighborhood children. Each accusation had been investigated and dismissed, but not before causing Sarah sleepless nights and mounting legal fees. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago when Karen had somehow convinced her brother, a city code inspector, to cite them for an illegal structure. The citation was bogus, but fighting it required another lawyer, another survey, and another chunk of their savings. Yesterday, David had made the decision that shattered Sarah's heart, but saved her sanity. "It's not worth it anymore," he'd said, his shoulders sagging with defeat. "She's making our lives hell. The kids can't even enjoy it because of the constant harassment." So the pool company had come that morning, dismantling their dream and hauling it away in pieces, while Karen watched from her bedroom window like a general surveying conquered territory. Sarah thought it was over. At 11 a.m., her doorbell rang. Sarah opened the door to find a petite woman with steel gray hair and predatory eyes. Not Karen. Someone new. "Mrs. Chen? I'm Janet Morrison from Channel 7 News." The woman's smile was sharp as broken glass. "I understand you've been in a neighborhood dispute that's escalated quite dramatically?" Sarah's stomach dropped. "I'm sorry, what?" "We received a tip about harassment, property destruction, and now allegations of threatening behavior. Would you care to comment?" "There's been no property destruction. Ma'am, we have photos of significant damage to your neighbor's fence, garden, and what appears to be her prized rose bushes." "The police report mentions threats of violence?" The world tilted sideways. "Police report? What are you talking about?" Janet Morrison's eyes gleamed. "You're telling me you're unaware that your neighbor filed charges this morning for criminal mischief and terroristic threatening?" Sarah gripped the doorframe. "That's impossible. I haven't left my house since—" "Mom?" Emma appeared behind her, face pale. "There are cops in Karen's driveway." Through the front window, Sarah could see 2 patrol cars and Karen gesticulating wildly at a uniformed officer, her voice carrying across the yard even through closed doors. "She destroyed my property. Look at this damage. She's been escalating for months, and now she's crossed the line." The reporter stepped closer. "Mrs. Chen, would you like to tell your side of the story before we go to air?" Sarah slammed the door shut, her hands shaking. This couldn't be happening. She'd spent the entire previous day inside, watching the pool removal from her window. She hadn't been anywhere near Karen's property. Her phone buzzed. David. Sarah, I just got a call from work. Someone contacted my boss claiming I'm involved in some neighborhood feud that's gone criminal. What the hell is going on? Before she could answer, someone pounded on her front door. Not the polite knock of a reporter, the authoritative bang of law enforcement. Mrs. Chen, this is Officer Martinez with the Riverside Police. We need to speak with you about an incident report filed this morning. Sarah's legs went weak. Emma grabbed her arm, eyes wide with fear they both tried to hide. Mom, what do we do? Sarah straightened her spine. Whatever game Karen was playing, she wouldn't go down without a fight. She'd documented everything, every complaint, every false report, every harassment. If Karen wanted to escalate, Sarah had ammunition. She opened the door to face Officer Martinez, a tired-looking man in his 40s whose expression suggested he'd seen this type of neighbor dispute before. Ma'am, I need to ask you about your whereabouts yesterday evening between 8 p.m. and midnight. I was here, at home. Why? Officer Martinez consulted his notepad. Your neighbor is claiming that sometime during that window, someone damaged her fence, destroyed her rose garden, and left threatening messages on her property. She's also alleging ongoing harassment and intimidation. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. Officer, with all due respect, Karen Williams has been harassing my family for 8 months. She's filed false complaints with every city department, called CPS on us, and made our lives miserable. Yesterday, we removed our pool just to end this nightmare. Can anyone verify you were home yesterday evening? My entire family. My husband David, my daughter Emma, my son Michael. We ordered pizza and watched movies. I have the receipt. Officer Martinez nodded, making notes. Mrs. Williams mentioned you've had previous conflicts? She's the one causing conflicts. I have documentation of every false complaint she's filed. Sarah's voice was steady, but inside she was screaming. How had removing the pool somehow made things worse? I'll need to see that documentation. But right now I need you to come take a look at the damage she's reporting. Sarah's heart hammered. Am I under arrest? Not at this time, but Mrs. Williams is pressing charges and we need to investigate her claims. As they walked across the yard toward Karen's property, Sarah's mind raced. The reporter was filming from the street, neighbors had gathered on their porches, and Emma was watching from the window with tears streaming down her face. When they rounded Karen's fence, Sarah's breath caught. The damage was extensive and deliberate. A section of wooden fence had been smashed. Karen's prize-winning rose bushes were uprooted and trampled, and spray-painted across her back gate in red letters was, "Leave us alone or else." But what made Sarah's blood turn to ice wasn't the destruction. It was the tool left behind like a signature. A sledgehammer. Lying in the middle of the carnage like an accusation. She'd never seen it before in her life. Officer Martinez studied her face carefully. Mrs. Chen, do you recognize this tool? No. Her voice was barely a whisper. I've never seen it before. It was found on your property line. Mrs. Williams says it came from your garage. The trap snapped shut around her with perfect precision. Someone had orchestrated this destruction and made sure she'd take the blame. But who? And why now, when she thought surrendering the pool would end their war? Karen emerged from her back door, her face a mask of righteous fury and something else, something that looked almost like satisfaction. Officer, there she is, the woman who's been terrorizing me for months. Karen's voice carried just the right note of victim's trembling. I tried to be patient, tried to work things out neighborly, but she's gone too far. Sarah stared at the woman who'd made her life hell, and suddenly everything clicked into place. The timing, the evidence, the reporter who'd arrived just after. The police? None of this was coincidence. You did this yourself, Sarah said quietly. Karen's eyes flashed. How dare you? Look at my beautiful garden. Look what you've done. Mrs. Chen, Officer Martinez warned, I'd be careful about making accusations without proof. But Sarah was done being careful, done being the victim, done playing defense in Karen's sick game. You destroyed your own property to frame me. You called the reporter. You planted that sledgehammer. Each word came out clear and steady. The question is why. What's really going on here, Karen? For just a moment, Karen's mask slipped. Something dark and desperate flickered across her features before the victim persona snapped back into place. She's delusional, officer. Completely unhinged. This is exactly what I was afraid would happen. But Sarah had seen it. That flash of panic. Karen was hiding something bigger than a neighbor dispute. Something worth destroying her own property to cover up. As Officer Martinez B., the Riverside County Jail wasn't where Sarah had planned to spend her Tuesday night. The holding cell smelled of disinfectant and desperation, and the fluorescent lights hummed with the same relentless frequency as her racing thoughts. She'd been processed, fingerprinted, and photographed like a common criminal, all while Karen's performance played on repeat in her mind. David's face when he'd arrived at the station had nearly broken her. The confusion, the fear, the way he'd looked at her like she might actually be capable of the destruction Karen claimed, it cut deeper than any false accusation. "Sarah, I know you didn't do this," he'd said through the glass partition, but his voice carried a tremor that suggested he wasn't entirely certain. But why would she destroy her own property? What would be the point? That was the question that kept her awake as the hours crawled by. What was Karen's endgame? The pool was gone. Her stated objective achieved. So why escalate to criminal charges and media attention? At 6 a.m., Sarah's lawyer arrived. Patricia Valdez was a sharp-eyed criminal defense attorney David had found through his company's legal department. She carried herself like someone who'd seen every dirty trick in the book and had a few of her own. "Mrs. Chen, I've reviewed the charges and the evidence. Frankly, it's thin. Property damage, yes, but the connection to you is circumstantial at best." Sarah leaned forward. "It's all circumstantial because I didn't do it. I believe you, but believing and proving are different things. Tell me about this sledgehammer they found." "I'd never seen it before yesterday. We don't own one. David checked our garage twice. Someone planted it." Patricia made notes. "The prosecution will argue you disposed of your own sledgehammer and used a new one for the crime. But here's what's interesting. Your neighbor called this in at 6:47 a.m. Most people discover property damage when they're leaving for work or walking their dog. But Mrs. Williams called before sunrise." Sarah's pulse quickened. She was waiting for it to be discovered. Or she was awake because she knew exactly when to look. Patricia's eyes gleamed. "I'm going to request all of her phone records, security, footage from neighboring properties, and a full investigation into her background. If she's playing games, we'll expose them." 2 hours later, Sarah was released on bail. David was waiting in the parking lot, his face haggard from a sleepless night. He pulled her into his arms without a word, and for a moment, the nightmare felt manageable. "The kids?" Sarah asked. "Emma's staying home from school. Too many reporters. Calling. Michael's confused, but handling it better." David's jaw tightened. "I had to take personal leave. My boss says the company can't have employees involved in domestic terrorism situations." The phrase hit like a slap. "Domestic terrorism? David, I removed some fence posts. According to the news, you've been conducting a campaign of intimidation that culminated in property destruction and threats. Channel 7 ran the story 3 times overnight." Sarah's stomach clenched. "What did they say?" "That you're an unhinged neighbor who couldn't accept reasonable requests about your pool installation. That you escalated to vandalism when legal channels failed." David's voice was bitter. "They interviewed 3 neighbors who said you've seemed increasingly unstable recently." "Which neighbors?" "The Millers, the Johnsons, and that new couple on the corner. All of them suddenly very concerned about your mental state." Sarah stared at him. "David, I've barely spoken to any of those people in months. The Millers haven't lived here since March. They moved to Phoenix." David went very still. "That's impossible. Tom Miller was on camera yesterday talking about your erratic behavior. Call them, right now. Call their Phoenix number." David pulled out his phone with trembling fingers. Sarah watched his face change as he listened to the voicemail greeting. "Tom." Miller's voice, cheerful and distant, inviting callers to leave a message because they were enjoying retirement in sunny Arizona. "This doesn't make sense," David whispered. "If that wasn't Tom Miller on the news, then who?" "It was an actor," Sarah said, the pieces clicking together. "David, someone orchestrated this entire thing. The property damage, The fake witnesses. The media coverage. It's all designed to destroy our credibility and make us look crazy. But why? Who would go to that much trouble over a pool dispute? Sarah thought about the figure in Karen's upstairs window, the way Karen's mask had slipped for just a moment, the strange satisfaction in her eyes as the handcuffs clicked shut. I don't think this is about the pool at all. When they arrived home, the street looked like a crime scene. News vans lined the curb, reporters clustered on the sidewalk, and yellow police tape fluttered from Karen's fence like party streamers from hell. Sarah pulled her hood up and hurried toward their front door, but a familiar voice stopped her. Cold. Mrs. Chen? Janet Morrison, Channel 7? Do you have any comment on the additional charges being filed? Sarah spun around. Additional charges? Janet's predatory smile returned. The district attorney's office just announced they're adding stalking and harassment charges based on new evidence that's come to light. Apparently, you've been conducting surveillance on Mrs. Williams for weeks. The blood drained from Sarah's face. That's absolutely false. We have photos, Mrs. Chen, taken from your property, showing Mrs. Williams in various states of undress through her bedroom window. Very concerning behavior. Sarah's knees nearly buckled. I would never. The photos were found on your computer during this morning's search warrant execution. Search warrant. Sarah looked at her house and noticed for the first time that the front door was slightly ajar, a piece of official-looking paper taped to the frame. David pushed past the reporters, his face white with rage. Get off our property. Now. Inside, their home looked like it had been hit by a tornado. Drawers pulled out, furniture moved, electronics missing. Emma sat on the couch in her pajamas, tears streaming down her face. Mom, they took our computers, all of them. They said you had illegal pictures on them. Sarah sank into a chair, overwhelmed. Someone had planted evidence on their computers, just like they'd planted the sledgehammer. The scope of the conspiracy was breathtaking and terrifying. Emma, did you see the officers who did this? Yeah, there were 3 of them. But Mom, one of them looked familiar, like I'd seen him before. Sarah's attention sharpened. Where? I don't know, maybe around the neighborhood? Emma wiped her eyes. He kept looking at Karen's house while they were searching, like he was checking in or something. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Emma, I need you to think carefully. When did you first notice this officer around the neighborhood? Emma screwed up her face in concentration. Maybe 2 weeks ago? He was in a regular car, not a police car, talking to Karen by her mailbox. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was more disturbing than Sarah had imagined. This wasn't just about framing her for property damage. Someone was systematically destroying her life with methodical precision. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging or your family pays the price. This is your only warning. Sarah showed the message to David, whose face went ashen. We're calling Patricia right now, he said. And then we're getting the hell out of here. But as David dialed their lawyer, Sarah caught movement in Karen's upstairs window again. This time, she was ready. She grabbed Emma's phone and zoomed in, snapping photos before the figure could disappear. The image was blurry but clear enough to make out a man's profile. Middle-aged, clean-shaven, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She knew that face. She'd seen it in their house 3 hours ago, wearing a police uniform and planting evidence on their computers. David, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I think we're in more trouble than we realized. Outside, the reporters were packing up their equipment, satisfied with the day's destruction. But Karen remained at her window, watching their house with the patience of a spider who knew her web was perfect. What Sarah didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the man in Karen's window was making a phone call of his own. And the person on the other end was someone who'd been waiting 8 months for this moment to arrive. Someone who needed the Chen family destroyed before they accidentally uncovered a secret that would bring down more than just a neighborhood dispute. The pool had never been the target. Sarah Chen was. And tomorrow, they would find out why. At 2:47 a.m., Sarah jolted awake to the sound of breaking glass. Not from their house, from Karen's. She crept to the bedroom window and peered through the blinds, her heart hammering against her ribs. A dark SUV sat in Karen's driveway, engine running. Two figures moved urgently between the vehicle and the house, carrying boxes and what looked like computer equipment. This wasn't a burglary. It was an evacuation. Sarah grabbed her phone and started recording, zooming in as much as possible. The license plate was partially obscured, but she caught enough. XGF 7234. One of the figures turned toward her house, and she ducked back instinctively. It was the same corrupt cop from yesterday's search. By morning, Karen's house was empty. No forwarding address, no explanation, just abandoned like a discarded prop from an elaborate stage production. The for sale sign that appeared at dawn looked freshly printed. Patricia Valdez arrived at 8 a.m. with news that changed everything. "Charges have been dropped," she announced, but her expression wasn't celebratory. All of them. The DA's office called an hour ago saying new evidence has come to light that exonerates you completely. David frowned. That's good news, right? It should be. But they're being cagey about what this new evidence is, and they want to meet with Sarah immediately. No lawyers present. Sarah's stomach knotted. That doesn't sound like exoneration. That sounds like a trap. I agree. But here's what's interesting. I ran that background check on Karen Williams yesterday. Guess what I found? What? Karen Williams doesn't exist. The address has been occupied by a woman using that name for exactly 9 months. But there's no paper trail before that. No credit history, no employment records, no family connections. It's a completely fabricated identity. Emma looked up from her laptop, where she'd been researching the license plate number. Mom, I found something weird too. That SUV from last night, it's registered to Blackstone Security Solutions. Sarah had never heard the name, but David went pale. Patricia, I need to tell you something. Something I should have mentioned earlier. David's voice was shaky. About 18 months ago, I was working on a project for the city, software integration for the new traffic monitoring system. I discovered some irregularities. What kind of irregularities? The system was designed to do more than monitor traffic. It was collecting facial recognition data, license plate information, and location tracking on every citizen. I thought it was a mistake, so I flagged it in my report. Sarah stared at her husband. You never told me about this. Because 2 days later, my supervisor told me to delete the report and pretend I'd never seen anything. Said it was classified. And above my pay grade. David ran his hands through his hair. I should have pushed back, but they implied my job would be at risk. Patricia leaned forward. David, did you delete the report? I deleted it from the work servers. But I kept a copy at home, on our old computer, the one I moved to the garage when we got the new one, the same garage where the sledgehammer had supposedly come from, the same property line where evidence kept appearing. Sarah's mind raced. David, someone's been watching us for months. The pool complaints, the harassment. It was all designed to get access to our property, to find that report. But why didn't they just break in and take it? Because they needed us discredited first. If we'd reported a break-in, if we'd claimed someone was targeting us, they needed everyone to think we were paranoid and unstable. Sarah felt the pieces clicking into place. The pool was perfect cover, a neighbor dispute that escalated. It explained away any complaints we might make about surveillance or harassment. Patricia stood abruptly. We need to get that computer before they do. But when they reached the garage, David's old desktop was gone. In its place sat a note written in Karen's familiar handwriting. Thanks for the memories. Kay, we're too late, David whispered. Maybe not. Emma held up her phone. Remember how you always made us back everything up to the cloud, Dad? Even the old computer? David's eyes widened. The automatic backup service. It would have uploaded everything, including work files I brought home. Within minutes, they'd accessed David's cloud storage and found the original report. The document was damning, proof that the city's traffic monitoring system was actually an illegal mass surveillance network, collecting data on citizens without warrants or consent. But the real bombshell was in the metadata. The system's backend was owned and operated by Blackstone Security Solutions, the same company that owned the SUV from Karen's midnight evacuation. This is a federal crime, Patricia breathed. Violation of the Fourth Amendment, illegal surveillance, conspiracy. We're talking about RICO charges. Sarah stared at the screen, understanding finally why they'd gone to such elaborate lengths to destroy her credibility. They needed to make sure if we ever surfaced this information, no one would believe us. We'd be the crazy neighbors who made false police reports and harassed innocent people. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Don't answer it, Patricia warned. But Sarah was already swiping to accept. Mrs. Chen, this is Detective Rodriguez with the District Attorney's Office. We'd like to meet with you this morning to discuss some new developments in your case. Sarah looked at Patricia, who nodded grimly. This was the trap they'd been expecting. Detective, I'll be there with my attorney. Actually, Mrs. Chen, this is a matter of national security. No attorneys permitted. Then no meeting, Sarah said, and hung up. 30 seconds later, her phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed Emma's school. Mrs. Chen, this is Principal Martinez. I'm afraid there's been an incident with Emma. She's in the nurse's office, and we need you to come immediately. Sarah's blood chilled. Emma was sitting right next to her. What kind of incident? She appears to have suffered some kind of allergic reaction. She's asking for her mother. Sarah looked at Emma, who was staring back with wide, frightened eyes. Principal Martinez, Emma is here with me. She's not at school. Silence on the other end. Then, Mrs. Chen, I think there's been some confusion. Emma Chen is definitely here and she needs medical attention. The line went dead. Patricia was already dialing 911. This is kidnapping. They're using a decoy to draw you out. But before Sarah could respond, David's phone rang. His work number. David Chen? This is Agent Harrison, FBI. We need you to come in immediately regarding your involvement in a national security breach. David's hand shook as he accepted the call. I don't understand. Mr. Chen, we have evidence that you've been selling classified government surveillance data to foreign operatives. If you cooperate, we can work out a deal. But you need to come in now, before we issue a warrant. It was masterful. Divide the family, isolate them, make them panic, and act separately. Sarah grabbed David's phone. Agent Harrison, this is Sarah Chen. Before my husband goes anywhere, I want to see your credentials and speak to your supervisor. Mrs. Chen, you're interfering with a federal investigation. No, I'm protecting my family from people who've been harassing us. For months under false pretenses. Sarah's voice was steel. If you're legitimate federal agents, you'll have no problem proving it through proper channels. She hung up and immediately called 911 herself. I need to report attempted kidnapping, impersonation of federal officers, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The real police arrived within minutes. Officers Sarah recognized from the neighborhood, not the corrupt cop who'd searched their house. Patricia had already contacted the FBI's field office directly, and legitimate federal agents were en route. But as they waited, Sarah noticed something that made her stomach drop. The news vans were returning. Patricia, they're going to try one more play. Something public. Something that discredits us before the real authorities can investigate. What do you mean? Sarah pointed to the street where Janet Morrison was setting up for another broadcast. They need to control the narrative one last time. Make us look like the criminals before the truth comes out. As if summoned by her words, Janet Morrison approached with her camera crew. Mrs. Chen! We've received disturbing reports that you've been making false claims about government surveillance and threatening federal agents. Would you care to comment on your apparent mental breakdown? But this time, Sarah was ready. Ms. Morrison, I have a question for you. How did you know to be here for my arrest 2 days ago? You arrived before the police had even finished processing the scene. Janet's confident smile flickered. We received a tip from a concerned citizen. Really? Because according to phone records that the FBI is now reviewing, you received that call from a number registered to Blackstone Security Solutions, the same company that's been running an illegal surveillance network in our city. The color drained from Janet's face. Sarah held up her phone, which had been recording the entire conversation. You're not a reporter, Ms. Morrison. You're part of the conspiracy. And in about 5 minutes, when the real FBI agents arrive, you're... Going to have some very interesting questions to answer. Janet Morrison stepped backward, her professional composure cracking. Behind her, the camera operator, a man Sarah now recognized as one of the figures from Karen's house, was already packing up equipment and heading for their van. But they were too late. FBI vehicles were turning onto the street from both directions, and the trap that had been set for the Chen family was about to snap shut on its true architects. As federal agents swarmed the EY,